My question is about climate change. So if I remember correctly, I heard you once say in a video that you do believe that human activity does have some sort of effect on the climate.
Yep.
So one, I would just like you to explain a little bit of your understanding about climate change.
Sure.
And another question is, are there any government policies that you would support in terms to mitigate carbon emissions? Yeah.
Okay, so so my perspective on climate change is, number one, I'm not a climatologist, but accepting the IPCC reports, you have to take into account the fact that modeling has been wrong for 20 to 30 years. It's always been overestimating the amount of climate change that's actually taken place. But virtually every reputable scientist, including folks who are called skeptics, believe that the climate is warming. There's an argument about as to how much, and that over 50% of that warming is probably attributable to human activity. Now that raises other questions, which is, okay, so let's say the Earth is warming. What kind of damage is that actually going to do? And this is a serious question, right? Let's say that the Earth is warming and we're causing it. Does that mean that it's the day after tomorrow and massive floods in New York and Dennis Quaid running around with Jake Gyllenhaal trying to avoid the freeze? No, it doesn't, right? It means that over the course of the next 100 years that the water level is going to rise a rather predictable number of inches or feet, and then humans will migrate based on those weather patterns, as humans have done since human beings became human beings and started walking on 2 feet. So, you know, I'm a little more sanguine about the possibility of long-term climate change than a lot of the catastrophists who seem to assume that there's going to be tremendous damage done. All the talk, for example, about the storms are becoming that more severe and they're doing that much more damage. The statistics really don't back that up. What they really back up is that we're just building more stuff in the path of hurricanes, that we're building more expensive stuff in the path of hurricanes. And so when the storms break that stuff, then it's more expensive for us to fix that stuff. Because the number of hurricanes actually hasn't changed markedly over time. And when folks say the intensity of hurricanes has changed, what they really mean is that the amount of cost associated with the hurricane has changed. As far as what should be done about that, well, the biggest problem that you have is a serious collective action problem. Let's assume that you really think that there's a huge problem. You still have to decide whether you believe, let's put it this way, what level of climate change requires what level of cutbacks in terms of the global economy. So there's a fellow whose name escapes me right now who just won the Nobel Prize in Economics who legitimately made his entire career out of studying the economics of climate change. When does he think that intervention economically is called for? He says that until he believes that over the next century there's 3.5 degrees centigrade of climate change, that intervention actually would be counterproductive. It would cost more to intervene than it would to actually allow the damage to take place and just cope with it, because the economy is going to continue to grow over time. So I don't see any reason why I think that I would know better than he does. It's also a basic fact that the only countries that have really been abiding by any of the attempts to reduce climate change have been extraordinarily developed countries. Developing countries have no interest in sacrificing their own people at the altar of climate change. And the #1 reducer in emissions over the past year was actually the United States. I mean, the United States pulls out of the Paris Accords. The Paris Accords, by the way, did nothing. They were completely useless. It was basically sign a piece of paper saying you don't like climate change. Okay, fine, I signed it, yay. And then everybody's like, oh, we solved climate change. No, you didn't. What does solve climate change is technological progress. And technological progress has led to a reduction in carbon emissions in the United States. It will not lead to a reduction in carbon emissions in developing countries for another 10 to 15 years, including places like China. So it's a complex issue, and all the folks who are basically like, let's just kill capitalism. Good luck with that.
Thank you.